What's up, everybody? It's your favorite list maker's favorite nerd, and today we are looking at my top 5, bottom 5 non-transforming figures. This is going to cover all of the figures not affiliated with the Transformers brand, and it also includes figures that I've looked at on Patreon and aren't part of my own personal collection. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with the top 5 most disappointing figures of the year, and coming in at number 5 is Mayfax Wolverine. The issue here is that this came right behind the Cyclops, and the Cyclops is sculpted beautifully, painted beautifully. The Mayfax Wolverine is sculpted beautifully, painted beautifully, but the Cyclops is also built better. Coming right behind that Cyclops, the Wolverine just doesn't stand up, and it ends up being more disappointing than it would have been normally. Mayfax tends to be a hit or miss company for me, and when they hit big, but when they miss, they usually miss big. And this Wolverine just had too many issues, especially coming right off of the back of the Cyclops, which was really well done. So this is my number 5, and the reason why it's so low on the list is because it does look so Number good. 4, SH Figuarts 89 Batman. A figure that I was really looking forward to. Once again, seemed to have a great sculpt. Once again, seemed to have great paint. And when I got it in hand, I was like, oh no. And it really comes down to the cape. I have him in this pose, and he'll be in this pose forever because his cape is so obnoxious. Also, they limited the head articulation. The reason why they did this is because the head has limited articulation in the movie. However, I'm paying for the toy, so how about give me a break and let me do some stuff I want to do. This is one of those things I've been talking about a bit on Patreon this year, is that sometimes when companies try to capture the movie essence, they miss the point of buying a figure. And for that reason, this hits number 4 on the disappointing list. And just to be clear and remind you, that doesn't mean that they're bad figures. It means they're disappointing figures. Coming in at number 3 is the Shf Emperor. Now I have this figure sitting on top of the old Black Series cloak, and I had to do this because this was a very pricey figure that was sold on the back of the gimmick of you were basically getting 4 figures in one set, 2 Royal Guard and 2 Emperor figures, but they only gave you 1 hood. So in order to utilize the other Emperor, you had to swap the hood out. They couldn't bear the thought of letting you have 2 independent figures for $200 plus give you 2 statues of Royal Guards. Now the statues may have been a bit misleading on my end to think that they would give you all of that for that low price. But since they are in fact statues with no engineering required, or I guess I should say limited engineering required, they could have thrown in 2 hoods so that you could have a sitting Emperor and a standing Emperor. But they couldn't bear the thought of it. This is why this ends up at number 3 on my most disappointing list. My number 2 are the Super 7 Thundercats and Turtles. I don't have a lot of experience with Super 7, but I've always heard their high praises. I have some of the Masters of the Universe classics, but I thought that with time and a larger price point, they would have made improvements to something that was already pretty good. They haven't, but they're charging almost double, and the sculpts are beautiful, and the materials are solid, and they're pretty clean and well painted, and they come with a lot of accessories. They're good figures. That's why I want to stress again, this isn't a worst figure list. It's most disappointing, and I would think that if they doubled the price point, with years later in the game, hopefully building off of experience, that something would have gotten better. But it's pretty much business as usual. And my opinion is, other companies have just left them in the dust. If they don't keep up with the times, they will become obsolete. It's just my humble opinion. Or perhaps not so humble. And my number 1 is the new Clone Trooper. Once again, beautiful sculpt. Once again, they mostly come well painted. However, it's little decisions they made, like what they did with the elbow armor and the knee armor. Specifically the knee armor. Instead of attaching it to the lower leg, they attached it to the upper leg. So if you ever bend the knee and want to have him like crouch down, the knee armor is always going to sit off to the side. Like, it's just little decisions that they made that are super goofy and that I would expect Hasbro at this point in the game to be well beyond. Moving into the surprisingly good category. Figures that I didn't expect to love, or didn't have many high expectations of, but ended up impressing me with how much I enjoy them, how well they were made, or just how striking they end up on a shelf. And number 5 is definitely the Hot Toys Mall from Solo. I bought this as I got the order that it was shipping. I was like, man, I don't even know if I want this anymore. I wasn't feeling it. I felt a lot of regrets, got it out of the box, reviewed it, put it on a display, and have loved it ever since. It catches my eye almost every time I walk past it. Doesn't mean it's a perfect figure, but I am surprised at how much I like it. Staying right in line at number 4 is Hot Toys Critic. Now, I love this character. I've gone on about him for hours upon hours on Nerd Rage and Force Sensitive, but that doesn't mean that I was looking forward to a $250 figure wearing horse riding pants and an old man cape. I just didn't think I was going to enjoy it a whole lot. I just got it because of how much I love the character. But that ended up being somewhat the key. As I put him on my shelf, I haven't been able to look away from him. In fact, where he sits right behind Tarkin, and I often want to move him in front of Tarkin just because of how much I enjoy the figure. And also, I gotta say, a large part of it comes down to how good that face sculpt. Just one of their best. So this is number 4 on the list. My number 3 is the entire NECA Turtles line. Now, don't get me wrong. These figures still have all the issues that continue to plague NECA through all their figures. And the same positives as well. They definitely wouldn't make the best figures of the year list, not in a million years. But because of how prolific they've been, and also how deep into the line they're going, I'm surprised at how much I am enjoying this line, and how good they tend to look together on the shelf. So for that alone, they had to come in at number 3 for surprisingly good. Number 2, the Hellfire Club. If you know me, you know I think that Marvel Legends has come an awfully long way from when I first started getting involved with it. And while this set isn't perfect, I was surprised at just how much sculpted detail went into these and how much paint went into these. Yes, they are an exclusive, but I got news for you. Just because Hasbro makes something an exclusive doesn't mean that I expect much from it. But I was really blown away at just how much love went into this set. And for that, they make the list for most surprisingly good at number 2. And my number 1 on the list for most surprisingly good is Mayfax Cyclops. And I gotta tell you, a big part of this is just that, like, I have such a hit or miss relationship with Mayfax that anytime they make a figure that's good, I'm usually somewhat blown away. However, this one is good on a whole different level. Not only is it good for Mayfax, it's good, period. And is actually one of the better 1/12 scaled import figures I've ever looked at. Beautifully painted, perfectly sculpted, and well built. Couldn't ask for much more. Moving on to the worst figures of the year. Coming in at number 5, Hot Toys Ant-Man. Not that it's terrible in and of itself, but they botched the face sculpt. And while Hot Toys does deliver a certain caliber of quality kind of across the board, what you really expect for them to nail are the face sculpts. And when they totally botch it, I'm not talking about like it's not quite right. I think most of us can live with it's not quite right. But when they totally botch it, it's just too big of an issue to look beyond. And that's why it comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the Figures Mandalorian. And look, it's not a terrible figure, but it is one of the worst ones I bought this year, and it really comes down to 2 things. The proportions are wonky, the head is super little, it throws the entire look of the figure off, the cape ends up looking like it was cut out of construction paper, it looks good around the collar, but it looks weird around the rest of the figure, and the accessories are awkward, flimsy, fumbly, and detract from the figure more than they add to it. And that's why this one comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, the Todd McFarlane Necron. I know people are crazy about this figure, but I am not. And I do think that McFarlane has improved overall this year. I think his DC stuff is better. Not great, but better. I think that he wants his Spawn stuff to be better. I think he has started caring a bit about being a competitor in the action figure world. However, my issues with this figure is the paint color seemed off, the figure's not well balanced, and it still fumbles the articulation. Necrons are cool. 40K is cool. This one doesn't quite land for me. Number 2, G.I. Joe Classified Scarlet. In a line that has gone to evolve the look of the characters while keeping the kind of primal, iconic things about it that let you instantly know what it is from a mile away, even though it doesn't look quite like you remember, this is one that they just completely missed the bus on. I wouldn't know this is Scarlet unless somebody told me it was Scarlet. The face doesn't look quite like her. The costume doesn't look anything like it, just has a couple of the color elements to it, and the crossbow was stupid too, but not stupid in the fact that it was included, just how it goes together. So while I like this line an awful lot, this figure, huge miss for me. Star Wars Hyper Real Luke from Hasbro. Coming off of the heels of the Vader, which I quite enjoyed, I had relatively high hopes for this figure, but let alone the issue that the sculpt isn't 100% right, because rarely do they get Mark Hamill 100% right. But add on to that the fact that the materials feel like they were made from an adult toy store, the whole thing ended up making me feel weird. I'm pretty sure this is the nail in the coffin of this line, and that's why it makes the list as the top dog position worst figure of the year. Moving on to the best figures of the year. Coming in at number 5 is the SH Figuarts IG-11. Not only is it painted beautifully, sculpted beautifully, well articulated, etc., etc., it also did exactly for this character what the show did for this character. Before watching The Mandalorian, I was like, there's no way that this droid could ever be cool or move in a way that was menacing. Watched The Mandalorian and I was like, oh wait, yes it can. They can do just that if they want to. And they did it. Simultaneously, I also used to think about the figures. There's no way they could make this figure cool, intimidating, and actually work functionally. SH Figuarts was like, yep, we can do that. We'll do that right now. How about this? You like this? And that's why this figure makes number 5 for me. Now, I've got some issues with Storm Collectibles, especially in regard to their quality of materials and how well those materials hold up over time. That being said, for the moment, there's nothing I can take away about this Storm Collectibles Lobo figure. Sculpted beautifully, painted beautifully, tons of articulation, tons of accessories. I never thought in my life I'd have a Lobo figure as wicked as this, and yet here it is with cigar in mouth, ready to rock and roll, my main man. Just a tremendous offering, pretty much from top to bottom. Now, how it holds up over a year, we'll have to check back next year. But for right now, pretty stellar. Coming in at number 3, Hot Toys Leia. This is the exact inverse of the Ant-Man. They nail this head sculpt. They nail the soft goods. And they give it a demeanor that is able to capture the grace and elegance of the character in this scene specifically. At every turn, there's attention to detail. This isn't an action figure, right? She doesn't do a whole lot of action in this outfit. But as a result, they end up giving you everything else. They give you all of the character elements that this part of the film encapsulated for her. And they do it beautifully. My number 2 choice is the G.I. Joe Classified Snake Eyes figure. Now, this is the deluxe version, so that's the only one, that I can judge, but this blew me away when I got it. This felt like an import figure with the amount of accessories, swap out hands, posing options, sculpt, paint, articulation, everything was just improved upon all of the basic things they have learned with their Black Series and Legends line. This was somehow a step above both, and for that, it earns its spot at number 2. And my number 1, even though it came out last year, it came out after I did my list last year, like the last week of December or whatever, the SH Figuarts Old Man Solo. It's perfect. It's sculpted perfectly. It's painted perfectly. It's articulated perfectly. It comes with the perfect accessories. It's pretty much perfect. Just a mind-blowing figure. And I would just be doing myself and you guys a disservice to not include it, even though it kind of came out in a loophole era between years. It's stunning. So there it is. And, you know, obviously missing the ones that I didn't buy, but had the opportunity to look at. And, you know, not for nothing, like, it's a pretty interesting year for the action figure. Like, I have separate feelings about how it turned out for Transformers, and maybe I'll get into that on the next one. But in terms of action figures, this was a pretty impressive year for what they accomplished, for what they produced, for the licenses they had, for the franchises they produced for. It's pretty impressive. Like, there's Marvel stuff here, there's DC stuff, there's G.I. Joe stuff, Turtle stuff, Star Wars stuff, you know, and then there's 40K stuff, and like, that's pretty impressive to me. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. We'll be back tomorrow with the best, worst Transformers of the year, and then we'll finish off with my purchases of the year, some of which will be from these two. So, see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.